Picture a man walking up a driveway in Fayetteville, North Carolina. It is late May. The oak trees along the street are full and green, and the air carries that thick Carolina heat that settles in like a promise. He has been gone since February. 90 days. He has a rucksack on his back and a look on his face that soldiers get when they have been operating in one world and are trying to locate themselves in another. He drops the rucksack at the front door. His wife opens it before he can knock. She is standing in the doorway, and behind her, gripping the back of her leg with both hands, is a little girl, 3 years old. She could not walk when he left in February. She walks now. She looks at this man at the door. Then she looks up at her mother. She asks who the man is. Her mother kneels down and tells her it is her father. The little girl takes one small step backward. She shakes her head. She does not believe her. That night, the operator does not sleep in the bedroom. His wife has been sleeping in the guest room for 14 weeks, alone, and neither of them knows how to walk back from that. He folds himself onto the couch, stares at the ceiling in a house in Fayetteville that feels like a room he has never been inside, and sometime around 2 a.m, he starts to understand something he cannot yet name. Within 5 years, this marriage will be over. It will end the same way 9 out of every 10 Delta Force marriages end. The internet will tell you the reason is the deployments. The reason is not the deployments. The reason started before this man left for his first rotation, before his first mission brief, before he earned the right to carry the call sign he carries now. The reason was installed in him deliberately during one of the most demanding selection processes the American military has ever designed. And the thing that destroyed his family is the exact same thing that made him one of the best soldiers who ever lived. The number itself is difficult to source with precision because Delta Force does not release statistics on anything, including divorce. JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command that controls Delta Force, does not publish family data. What the military makes available are broad Army-wide figures, and those figures do not break the special operations community down by unit. So the 90% number does not come from a government report or an academic study. It comes from former operators who have gone public. Men who wrote memoirs, gave interviews, and sat across from journalists and described, on record, what they watched happen to the men around them. Former Delta Force operator Dale Comstock, who served in the unit through the 1990s and has spoken extensively about the human cost of Special Operations Service, has described watching entire cohorts of operators lose their marriages within a few years of reaching the force. He is not alone. Multiple former operators who have published or spoken publicly describe the same pattern. Men who went through selection together, who lived on Fort Bragg in the same circles for years, watched their marriages dissolve around them at a rate that became almost predictable, not a surprise. A known outcome. The kind of thing that happens so consistently it stops being a tragedy and starts being a condition of service. The figures former operators describe cluster around the same range. Somewhere between 80 and 90% of Delta Force marriages end in divorce, higher than the Army average, higher than the Ranger Regiment average. The consensus among men who were inside the unit for a decade or more is that the figure is real, and the figure is roughly 9 in 10. Former operators use it in interviews with the flatness of men, describing weather patterns, not as a warning, as a fact of the environment they inhabited. That deserves a moment of actual consideration. A man earns one of the most competitive positions in the American military. He survives a selection course that eliminates roughly 80% of candidates who attempt it. He becomes part of a force of a few hundred soldiers, one of the most lethal and capable groups of people the United States government has ever assembled. And 9 out of 10 of those men will eventually come home to a house in Fayetteville and find that the family waiting there has quietly learned to survive without him. The deployments are the obvious explanation, and they deserve real weight, because the operational tempo of JSOC between 2003 and 2014 was something with no equivalent in modern peacetime military history. Delta Force operators during those years were not deploying once every 2 years the way a conventional infantry unit might. They were rotating into Iraq and Afghanistan at a pace that left some operators overseas more than they were home across multi-year stretches. Task Force 714, the JSOC element operating in Iraq, was running multiple direct action raids in a single night, week after week, across months that stretched into years. The men who executed those operations were running on a tempo that would have broken most soldiers. The fact that they did not break is itself one of the more remarkable things about this community. The families back in Fayetteville lived a different kind of breaking. A wife would get a call saying her husband was leaving again, or she would not get a call, because sometimes there was not time for one. She would drop him somewhere and drive back to a house where she was now a single parent with a deployment income and a family readiness officer who checked in occasionally. She would run the household alone, manage the children alone, handle every emergency alone. And then her husband would come back, and she would have to figure out how to fold a man back into a system that had reorganized around his absence. The children felt it differently. They grew up with a father who appeared and vanished, who was proud of them in the abstract. A 3-year-old in Fayetteville does not understand JSOC operational cycles. She understands that the man who is supposed to be her father is not there, and that her mother sometimes cries at night when she thinks no one can hear. So yes, the deployments matter. Any honest account of this has to give them real weight. Long absence from a marriage does damage that takes time and intention to repair. When the absences come one after another for years, the damage compounds. This is not complicated math, but the spouses who survived 10 years of marriage to a Delta operator say something different. And what they say is more unsettling than the deployment count. They say the hardest years were not always the years he was gone. They say the hardest years were sometimes the years he came back. Here is what former operators actually say when they talk about this honestly. A deployment is survivable. A marriage can survive a man being gone for months at a time. It is harder than most marriages, but couples survive it. A soldier deploys, the family adapts, the soldier comes home, the family readapts. It takes work and it takes intention, but it is a solvable problem. What is much harder to survive is the man who comes home a stranger and does not know he has become one. Selection changes people. Not because it is dangerous, though it is dangerous. Not because it is exhausting, though it pushes men past what they believed their bodies could endure. Selection changes people because it is specifically engineered to do that. The Delta Force selection course, conducted in the mountains of West Virginia, is one of the most psychologically demanding assessment processes in the world. Candidates navigate routes of unknown distance while carrying heavy loads, moving alone, with no feedback on their performance from cadre. They do not know if they are succeeding. They do not know if they are failing. They do not know if the next checkpoint will end their course or continue it. They navigate this uncertainty for weeks. Multiple former cadre members who have spoken publicly describe the psychological architecture of selection in terms that go beyond physical testing. The point, they explain, is not only to find men who can carry weight for long distances at high altitude. The point is to identify and develop men who can tolerate absolute uncertainty under sustained stress without requiring external validation, without needing reassurance, without needing to know how they are doing. The selection course does not just test for that capacity, it builds it. Deliberately and systematically, it takes whatever natural tendency a candidate has toward emotional self-sufficiency and develops it into something more like a permanent architecture. Pete Blaber, former Delta Force squadron commander and one of the very few men who have written a candid insider account of life in the unit, has written and spoken about the way elite selection and training reshapes a soldier's relationship to his own interior life. The job demands compartmentalization, not a